everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here on a Friday night, chilly Friday night. As you know, that you are at the, hopefully you're at the right event. You are. This is a conversation between Ignacio Sanchez Prado and Jasmina Barrera and Pergentino Jose. The book club conversation, this is what we're having today. Over the summer, we have a book club that was meant to introduce Chicagoans and is meant to introduce Chicagoans to the authors that are coming to the festival. Something that happened often during the festival where people said, I can't believe I haven't read this writer, and I wish I would have read them before they came. And so the idea was to start a book club that would do exactly that and introduce people to the authors. So the conversation today will be about literature, Latin American literature, Mexican literature specifically. So let me introduce them for you in case you're not familiar with their work. We have Jasmina Barrera. Jasmina Barrera was born in Mexico City in 1988. She was a fellow at the Foundation for Mexican Letters. Her book of essays, Cuerpo Extraño, Foreign Body, was awarded the Latin American Voices Prize for Literal Publishing in 2013. She has published her work in various print and digital media, such as Paris Review, El Malpensante, Words Without Borders, Nexos, Letras Libres, and Electric Literature. She has a master's degree in creative writing in Spanish from New York University, which she completed with the support of a Fulbright grant. Her book on lighthouses was published, translated by Christina McSweeney, was published in 2020 by Two Lines Press. She is editor and co-founder of Ediciones Antílope. She lives in Mexico City. Let me take this off. I forgot. Pergentino Jose was born in Buenavista, Los Chica, Oaxaca in 1981. He studied education at Escuela Normal Bilingüe and Intercultural Intercultural de Oaxaca, and received a master's in modern literature, in modern Latin American literature from the Universidad Austral de Chile in Valdivia, Chile. He wrote Y supe que responder, published in a bilingual edition in both Spanish and Zapotec. In 2012, he published a collection of short stories entitled Hormigas Rojas, and in 2014, he was published I'm gonna mess up the pronunciation of Language of Birds, there we go, a trilingual collection of poems written in Zapotec, Spanish, and English. His work has been included in the book Mexico 20 and Mexico 20 New Voices, an anthology of 20 Mexican writers under 40 who best represent Mexican literature. And moderating tonight's conversation is Ignacio M. Sanchez Prado. Ignacio M. Sanchez Prado is the Jarvis Thurston and Mona Van Dyne Professor in the Humanities at Washington University in St. Louis, a scholar of Mexican literature, cinema, and culture. He has published 7 authored books and over 100 academic articles. His most recent books are Strategic Occidentalism on Mexican Fiction, The Neoliberal Book Market, and the Question of World Literature, and Intermitencias Alfonsinas, Ensayos y Estudios Escogidos. He has also edited 14 critical collections, including A History of Mexican Literature and the forthcoming Mexican Literature as World Literature. His public writing has appeared in the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Review of Books, El Universal, and other publications. He will be the Klug Chair of the Cultures of South in the Library of Congress during the summer of 2021. So welcome our guests.
I'm gonna let Jasmina read from her most recent book, Punto de Cruz, and we'll go from there.
Muchas gracias. Estoy muy contenta de estar acá. Voy a leer el principio de esta novela que se llama Punto de Cruz. A mediodía me metí a bañar. La humedad en el cuarto de baño iba creciendo en el techo, despegaba la pintura y alimentaba una colonia de hongos, primero verdes y después rojos, como en una tortilla vieja. Es el tipo de cosas que dejé pasar durante el primer año y medio de vida de mi hija, demasiado cansada y atareada como estaba para prestarles atención, pero ahora empiezan a molestarme. Entré desnuda al cuarto, busqué la ropa y antes de vestirme escuché vibrar el celular. En la pantalla apareció un mensaje de Facebook de Valentina Flores. Tardé un instante en recordar que era la tía de Citlali. Me muero de tristeza, querida Mila, decía. Se me parte el corazón cada vez que escribo estas palabras. Citlali tuvo un accidente en el mar de Senegal y se ahogó. Ya traemos sus cenizas de regreso. Lo siento tanto, mi niña. Ella te adoraba y yo sé que tú a ella también. Me dolió la cabeza como si me hubieran roto la cara, como si me estuvieran tratando de succionar el cerebro por los ojos y no pudiera abrirlos. No sé cuánto tiempo estuve abrazando la toalla, sentada en la cama, procurando llorar en silencio para no llamar la atención de mi hija y de Andrés. En mi cerebro se sobreponían imágenes breves y dolorosas, como murciélagos en una cueva, el rostro de Citlali con los labios azules, sus manos luchando contra el mar, su boca abierta, tragando agua salada, su cuerpo flotando entre algas, espumas y botellas de plástico. Todo se mezclaba con la risa y el canto agudo de mi hija que bailaba con su padre un disco de The Breeders. El cabello húmedo escurría sobre mi cuello, me costaba respirar. Al rato su padre la dejó entretenida con algún juguete y entró en la habitación. ¿Pero cuál amiga?, preguntaba. No la conoces, decía yo. ¿La viste solo una vez? ¿La del perro con parvovirus? No. La punk, la ingeniera, la pelirroja antiniños, la rubia antiniños. Sonreí y al momento me di cuenta de que mi nariz empezaba a escurrir sangre. Andrés fue por algodón para detener la hemorragia. No tuve fuerzas para explicarle quién era Citlali. Hasta después, hasta la noche, empecé a intentarlo. ¿Es la que vivía en España? No, le digo a Andrés, esa es Dalia. Citlali se mudaba todo el tiempo. Al final vivía en Brasil, pero se la pasaba viajando porque trabajaba en una ONG ecologista. Ah, ¿y la conocí? ¿Una de pelo negro, morena? No, esa era Dalia. Citlali era de cabello claro y corto, muy delgada. La que usaba ropa medio masculina, sí, ella. Y a las dos las conociste de niñas, en la adolescencia. Pero luego estudiaste con Dalia. No la misma carrera, pero sí en la misma facultad. Ah, ya, creo que ya sé. Desperté muy tarde al día siguiente y lo primero que hice fue escribirle a Dalia. Respondió unas horas después. Escribió solo, ya sé. No supe qué más decirle y supongo que ella tampoco. La etimología del verbo bordar tiene una raíz indoeuropea, bar, que significa punta, aguja, que le emparenta con la palabra fastus de latín, que dio fastuoso y fastidio. Bordado y bordar vendrían después del francés antiguo bord, que significa lado de la nave. Ahí se relaciona con la palabra borde, porque el bordado se usaba para decorar el borde de la tela. Del siglo X es un pasaje del libro de Exeter que dice en anglosajón: Feme ait hire bordan gerisset. La traducción de esta frase es ambigua porque la palabra bordan significa bordado y también borde. Hay quien la traduce: el lugar de la mujer está junto a su bordado. Una traducción más libre podría ser: el lugar de una mujer está junto al abismo.
Thank you, Jasmina. And now we're gonna listen to Pergentino read from his book Hormigas Rojas. Ahí está. No.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Pues muchas gracias por la invitación y por esta gran oportunidad de leer en español. Desde el edificio. La ilusión de encontrar a Liznit me obliga a caminar. Los muros del edificio están cubiertos de musgo. Un temblor comienza a sacudir la tierra y algunas tablas del techo se caen. La luz de la luna se filtra por el hoyo que deja. El frío comienza a esparcirse mientras va asomándose la noche. Escucho pasos arriba. Dos mujeres conversan. Cecilia, te pedí que te quedaras en casa. ¿Quién cuidará de los niños, sobre todo del más pequeño? Mira, Isabela, tú ya no tienes ningún hijo a quien cuidar. Por eso estás aquí, esperando a que se abra la puerta del edificio. Claro que tengo. Salí esta mañana con el más pequeño amarrado con un rebozo a la espalda. Después de cruzar el río, cuando caminaba por los alrededores del edificio, me di cuenta de que ya no lo llevaba. Las señoras hablan en voz baja, cuidan que nadie las escuche. Espera, Cecilia, Escucho la respiración de alguien más. Viene de ahí abajo. Escucha. Es muy agitada. Como si las penas lo acorralaran. No sabremos quién es a menos que bajemos. No voy ni loca. Tengo que esperar a mi hijo. Por aquí tiene que llegar. Debiste pensar en eso antes. Te arriesgaste mucho. La crecida del río fue enorme. Pues era mejor intentar llevar al niño con el médico. La viruela le comenzó por los pies. Otro ligero temblor se deja sentir. Cae más madera del techo. Las señoras guardan silencio por un momento, después continúan. Algo pasó, Cecilia. ¿Te refieres al incendio del hospital? Sí. ¿Por qué nos desalojaron con tanta violencia? ¿No pensaron ni tantito que había madres que fuimos de tan lejos, arriesgándonos a ser arrastradas por el río? Desde que mataron a nuestros niños, siento que también a nosotras nos mataron. ¿Te acuerdas, Cecilia? ¿Te acuerdas? Hemos regresado a Quelové y nadie nos reconoce, como si solo pudieran ver nuestras sombras. Tenemos que caminar de noche por las calles para que los perros nos ladren y así sentir que estamos vivas. No sé qué haría sin ti, Cecilia. No me dejes. Creo que alguien nos sigue escuchando. Oigo la respiración por aquí cerca. Es tormentosa, como si todas las penas de Quelové lo aquejaran. No creo que se trate de un hombre joven, Isabela. Debe ser un viejo. Más bien parece un toro por la forma tan violenta de respirar.
Well, thank you for that introduction. The first question I want to raise, the first question I want to raise is the question of language, which is very present in the work of both of you in different ways. Obviously, we just heard Jasmina read a whole segment of her novel about etymology, right? And Pergentino works in the bilingual space between Zapoteco and Spanish, just like many Mexican writers from various indigenous communities do so. I would like to raise the question separately. What does language mean to you in your writing, and what is the concept of language in your work?
Ándate. Nos la pusiste fácil. Pues muchísimas cosas, ¿no? O sea, I'm so sorry, I forgot. Okay. So language for me is the material of what I do. It's like a rock for an artist or the pigments for a painter. And there are, of course, so many things around it. No, it's a material that has a history. We're talking about etymology. It's a material that comes in many different colors, which could be the different languages. It's a material that communicates, of course, or doesn't. And that has, I don't know, 1,000 possibilities. And what was the other question?
El rol en tu trabajo del lenguaje.
Oh, yeah. So it has taken many different roles, I would say. But just to focus on etymologies, for example, I recently published a book for children that is called Los Nombres de los Animales, so the names of animals. And it's a book about the etymology of the names of animals in Spanish, although what I like about it is that it takes you to all of these different languages. It takes you to Greek, it takes you to Latin, it takes you to Nahuatl. And I love that language is something that we use every day. It's such a common coin of transaction. But then there's so much to it that we forget. It's sound, it's music, it's history. So that book was an approach for children so that they realize all that is behind the words. We don't even know why we use them. And it's something that keeps fascinating me. I am also right now working on a project that has to do with the Mayan language. I've also always loved other languages and the way in which learning another language confronts you with your own. And not only other languages, but I would say that even being around people who speak different kinds of Spanish, for example, makes you realize the way in which you yourself use Spanish. And for me, that's just wonderful. So I have a Chilean husband, and that's one of the things I really like about being every day with someone who speaks a different kind of Spanish. And I studied English literature, so I think I've been in this world of bilingual translation for a very long time, and I think it's enriched my Spanish, or I hope so. So, as I was saying, I'm right now working in this project about Mayan language because my great grandfather wrote dictionary in Mayan, from Mayan to Spanish. And I was very curious, how did that happen, that in the family of someone who was so close to that language, the language was lost in 2 generations? That's what I'm trying to answer by writing this essay.
Adelante. Si quieres, háblalo en español y después le pasas el micro para la traducción.
Vamos a tardar mucho, pero bueno.
Gracias. Eso no se podrá así. No,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bueno, buenas noches. Sí, hablar de lenguaje es hablar como toda la tradición literaria que contiene el español, ¿no? Es como construir literatura.
To speak of language is to think about and speak about all the traditions of literature.
Sí, en mi caso, mi lengua materna es el zapoteco y por lo tanto el español que yo hablo es un español que interfiere, bueno, que está permeado por ese zapoteco siempre.
In my case, my native tongue is Zapoteco, which is permeating the ways in which I speak Spanish.
Sí, en el primer cuento que les leí, pues ahí aparecen palabras muy del zapoteco, por ejemplo, liznit, quelove. Siempre se recurre a eso, pero yo creo que no es una decisión consciente, sino que es algo que aparece sin que uno tome conciencia de eso ya a la hora de la escritura.
In this first story that I read, there's a few words coming from Zapotec, such as liznit. And it's not a...
Se apagó.
Can you still hear me? How about I speak up? Is that better? Well, it's not a conscious issue. It's just something that happens when speaking Spanish with this origin in Zapotec.
Pues sí, escribir literatura es como tomar esa decisión, a veces dolorosa, qué bueno que Yasmina lo comenta, y la realidad que permea las lenguas indígenas, de que ya no se sigue la tradición de oralidad, ya no se transmite la lengua, y es lo que estamos viviendo ahorita mismo, incluso para la cultura zapoteca.
Yeah, it's right indigenous languages to confront the Spain losing languages from one generation to another. And yeah, that loss.
Sí, en mi literatura, con mucha nostalgia, yo siempre trato, siempre y cuando lo permita la ficción, colocar expresiones en zapoteco como para denotar y mostrar que hay otras posibilidades de literatura.
Yeah, in his approach to writing, there's some nostalgia by which he tries to place Zapotec within the text and preserve it in that way.
Y básicamente yo siempre he escrito sobre un pueblo que existe en Loxicha y que se llama Quelové, y casi allí transcurren todas las atmósferas o todas las acciones de mis cuentos.
and he's always writing about this one town named Kilove, where all the stories take place in that setting, in that locality.
Thank you. So following up with language, another switch that has happened to both of you is you both recently were published in English. Jasmina in Two Lines Press, her essay book on lighthouses, which I had the privilege to review when it came out, and Pergentino on Deep Vellum, which is a wonderful house that has really invested in translation, and especially in translation of Mexican and Latin American writers. So the question that I have for both of you is, now that your work exists in English and it starts to circulate, what is your experience with this new space of reading of your own work? And I don't know if you have a sense of what can be preserved or lost in translation whenever you move into English.
Sí, yo creo que leo muy poco inglés, pero aún así sí me doy cuenta de las cosas que no aparecen como uno pensaba que iban a aparecer, ¿no? Entonces, es la primera traducción del libro y que seguramente para la otra hay que trabajar más con el editor al inglés, ¿no? Porque imagínense, si leo poco inglés y me doy cuenta de cosas que no deben estar, algo está pasando. Sí, sí, sí.
Thank you. So English, we still notice when some things are translated in a way that was unexpected. So it's normal for the first translation, but he hopes that he can work on those things moving forward. Because if he knows the English, he can still tell us things that are translated differently, then there's something going on there.
Sí, lo único que me da mucho gusto es de que las expresiones en zapoteco difícilmente un traductor del inglés o de otras lenguas lo puede tocar. Entonces eso sí siempre va a estar ahí. El mao, chanzó, los saludos que están en zapoteco, eso sí siempre aparece.
And what he's really pleased about is that this appetite can't really be altered. It's something that's going to be preserved. So even in the translation process, that will remain as is.
So I was, I think, very lucky to work in this translation with Christina McSweeney, who I think is not only a wonderful translator, but a wonderful writer. I mean, I think you have to be a wonderful writer to be a wonderful translator. And I had a friendship relationship with Christina before this. We had correspondence for a couple of years. And I think the translation of this book became a part of that conversation. And we really talked about all of the issues that came and all of the questions that she had. And I think she came up with the best solution. So I was just like this all the time. And for me, it was a beautiful experience. As I said, I studied English literature. And for me, the English language is one that I hold really close to my heart. And so for the book to be in conversation with these books that I adore, in the sense of the language, was wonderful. And what happens to me now is that I sometimes get tired of reading my books in Spanish because I've read them so much and corrected them and reread them. And there comes a point when I just sort of am a little sick of them. But when Christina translated this book, and I started reading it, it was like reading something new yet familiar and fresh, and that's an amazing feeling.
The next question that I have is a little bit more to the specific barriers that both of you are breaking in Mexican literature, which are different. So I'm gonna separate the question individually. But I came to Jasmina's work first through the essay, which is a genre that is very close to my heart. I actually also reviewed her first book, maybe not as positively as the second one, but in any case, being an essayist is a very complicated thing because the literary market really favors fiction. And then one of the things that she has done that I think is one should remark is that she's part of a collective that runs one of the most exciting and important independent publishers in Mexico, Antílope, right, that has contributed to really open discussions. And more recently, even with this book, as far as I understand, I haven't had a chance to read it, there's also a conversation that many writers of your generation and your cohort have opened about the literary representation of motherhood, which of course has also created the machista backlash, like there's too much motherhood in literature now, right? But in reality, it's a topic that has been silenced in Mexican literature, and there are many works on the topic and also sort of programmatic anthologies on the topic. So this is a little preamble, but I want to hear, Yasmina, from you. What are the barriers that you felt you have faced as a Mexican writer, and how have you written through those obstacles?
So, okay, aquí con este. So I think the barriers or the obstacles have changed through time, because I think when I first started writing, being a woman writer was particularly hard, and I do think that I faced in Mexico a lot of machista violence of many different kinds, and different men who were, I don't know, menacing me or trying to stop my work from being published, or different kinds of violence. But I think there was a movement in Mexico, the Me Too movement, that came with a lot of strength in the literary scene. And I do think that has changed a lot what's happened later. I have the feeling that many of the big publishing houses are not just publishing more women, but really paying attention to what they're saying and opening up spaces so their voices can be heard. And many of the women readers are also demanding that these books be published because they want to read them. They feel engaged with this conversation. So that's one thing. I also think that, as you mentioned the essay, there's an issue with genres, not only with gender, but also with genres in literature in Spanish, I would say, which I think it's very genre-based still, and it has, of course, a different classification than the one in English. We don't use non-fiction and fiction as much as you do here. We use essay, and we use novel, and we use poetry. And I think still many of the programs that form writers, for example, the grant, the FONCA grant, still makes you choose a genre. And if you want to study in, I don't know, the Escuela Mexicana de Escritores, you have to choose a genre. And so I think they force us a lot to think literature from genres. And it is almost as if genres pre-existed literature. So it becomes, at a point, really hard to try to do work that breaks those boundaries. And there was a time when I had a previous literary agent who, I don't know if I should be saying this, but who was like, oh, nobody wants to publish essays. He hadn't even read it, but it was like, no, this is not going to work. And if you write strange books, they won't win awards because the awards are made for the genres. So I think that has been an issue in my literary career, and I hope that this also changes, because there's a lot of freedom that is being lost, I think.
Thank you, Jasmina. And for Pergentino, I first encountered your work when you published Hormigas Rojas in Almadía. And one thing that I have always seen, even through my own knowledge and ignorance, is that the circulation of literature, both written in indigenous languages, but also even just written in Spanish by indigenous writers, is very haphazard and limited. It's part of a long tradition of cultural segregation and discrimination that Mexican national culture has often been Hispanophone or idealized pre-Columbian cultures rather than deal with indigenous cultures of the present. So I would like to hear from you sort of the different challenge for you of your writing in Zapotec versus you're writing in Spanish and your bilingual publication. I presume that there's a question of self-translation in your work. And even, you know, crossing into English, the press presents you, and I think it's factual, as the first book of fiction by a Zapotec writer to be translated into English. So my question is, there are some limitations and restrictions that come from working in Zapotec or working as an indigenous writer, but there are also some restrictions in the content of your work. For instance, the focus on community that you have in your book traces to some parts of Mexican literature that are not always valued in the contemporary literary scene. So I don't know if you agree. I don't know if you agree with this characterization, but I would like to hear what are the obstacles that you have faced in your writing and what you have done to overcome them.
Bien, yo creo que lo que preguntas, lo que planteas es como pasas, es la misma pregunta siempre de qué lengua se escribe, ¿no? En qué lengua se construye la ficción. Porque muchos editores y mucha gente, muchos lectores míos también piensan de que mi trabajo como escritor es escribir todas esas historias en zapoteco y después hacerme la traducción al español.
So this question that you ask is relevant for the construction of fiction in language, and it's a question that has been posed before. So what is generally assumed is that the Filipino writes in Zapotec and then he translates himself to Spanish.
Sí, es como muy reiterativo esa observación y bueno, sería muy deshonesto si dijera sí, primero lo escribo en zapoteco porque es mi idioma materno y después lo hago. No, no es así. Es tal como está. Lo que está en español se escribió en español. Y las pocas expresiones en zapoteco están en zapoteco. Porque yo creo en la literatura como un acto de honestidad y de absoluta necesidad.
So that wouldn't be the case if you were dishonest, if you were to assume that's the case. The book, as says, that's how it was written. The books in Spanish were written in Spanish, the books in Zapotec were in Zapotec.
Creo en la literatura como un acto de absoluta honestidad y necesidad.
He believes in literature, he has faith in literature as an act of absolute honesty.
Sí, más o menos. Y bueno, entonces, eso es lo que primero debo de señalar, ¿no? Porque se piensa de que todo está construido en zapoteco, pues así, entonces sería como... Eso lo hago mucho, pero solo en poesía, porque yo también escribo textos de poesía, entonces la poesía, ahí sí, es en zapoteco. Si no es en zapoteco, no lo podría yo escribir, no podía hacer la interpretación al español, digamos. Entonces son como dos procesos, en narrativa es como está, español y zapoteco, y en poesía es zapoteco y luego español.
So when he writes poetry, that's different. The poetry is primarily in Zapotec, and that's the difference between fiction and poetry in the ways that he writes.
Y en cuanto al mundo editorial, de cómo presentan un autor, me parece que pues eso se rige por lógicas del mercado, ¿no? Luego le han puesto también en la contraportada del libro de que literatura fantástica, no sé, literatura, incluso, qué bueno que mencionas de que la literatura también es un ejercicio de jerarquía y de no tomar en cuenta las otras voces, pues, ¿no? De hecho, es muy difícil incluso la gente que quiera comprar literatura en lenguas indígenas, en las editoriales en México, simplemente a mí me pide, no sé, incluso hay otro parámetro entre narrativa, entre cuentos cortos y luego la novela, ¿no? Los editores siempre quieren la novela y no quieren los cuentos cortos.
So with regard to how the author is presented in the market, in the literary market, for the press, that's actually a key question. Whether it's presented as an indigenous author, or maybe this collection of stories has been presented as fantasy, which is something he doesn't agree with. And then the next question is about what kind of genre, again, is contained in the book. The press or the editors usually want a novel, and stories don't do that well or are not that requested.
Sí, incluso escritores jóvenes en lenguas indígenas me han preguntado recurrentemente la lista de que quieren quieren leer los autores de lenguas indígenas, pero que estén traducidos al inglés, ¿no? A mí eso es algo que, como si eso garantizara cierta calidad, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que la lógica del mercado está permeando todo, ¿no? Y me gustaría también señalar de que lo que yo muestro en mi literatura es un poquito esta vasta tradición de oralidad del zapoteco, la oralidad del zapoteco y luego la tradición literaria del español.
So one thing that is usually mentioned in Argentina is that what with this new authors writing in indigenous languages, it's usually expected that they be translated to English. So the question comes up of what is preserved in that translation. And
Sí, la oralidad y luego la tradición literaria.
And when he writes, he seeks to preserve this tradition of oral literature in Zapotec, and that is important for his work.
Y también qué bueno que señalas, porque siempre en México se habla como si las culturas indígenas no fueran culturas vivas, ¿no? Como si fueran de hace 100 años o antes de la revolución, o fueran en los tiempos de la colonia y hubiera habido todo un corte total, ¿no? O como algo del folclore, o como algo artesanal que está ahí, que nos interesa, en Oaxaca, por ejemplo, ¿no? Les interesa la mirada turística, pero no les interesa a la gente que los zapotecos del Oxicha, el zapoteco Sierra Norte, Istmo, es una cultura viva, pues, ¿no? Y parte de eso es lo que se muestra en mi literatura.
As Ignacio points out, it's constant that in Mexico there's this idea of indigenous cultures as something in the past, something either from the Revolution era or from colonial times, and it's the contemporary cultures are disregarded, ignored, and even in Oaxaca, there's this tendency for a touristic or a voyeuristic conception of indigenous cultures that is not so interested in the vast cultural differences in the region.
Quizás no hemos mejorado mucho cuando en la década de los 30 en el indigenismo, ¿no? Los escritores nacionales escribían sobre los temas indígenas, ¿no? Quizás no hemos avanzado tanto porque sigue permeando toda esta exclusión todavía en México.
Maybe Mexico hasn't progressed much from the 30s, the decade of the 30s, when indigenismo, the tendency for Mexican authors to write about indigenous cultures, was permeated most of the literature, and there hasn't been much progress since then.
I want to make sure I don't monopolize and I allow members of the audience to ask a question if they so wish. The only thing that I will say is that we have like this David Lynch thing where the light is like in our eyes. So I don't know that I can see from the second row back. So if anybody in the back wants to ask something, we would need you to acknowledge yourself out loud. So, but questions are welcome if anyone wants to ask something, so I don't monopolize the conversation.
There's someone in the back, I think. Oh, she's just recording.
I have many questions too, but I want to make sure. So, just in honor of this festival's focus on Mexican literature, I was wondering, this is a shorter question, but if you can talk of a Mexican writer in the past that you would recommend, someone that has inspired you, maybe a writer from the 19th or the 20th century or before, and then an author younger than you that you would like to, maybe it's probably not translated into English, but that you would like to see follow their career or recommend to readers.
Okay. So, I am right now writing about Elena Garro, who is a writer from the 20th century, and they asked me to write this short biography of her, and it's been quite a ride. I've been reading her books for like a year and many biographies, and I think, for example, Semana de Colores, which I don't know if it's even been translated into English, but if it has the title might be something like the Colored Week or the Week of Colors or something like that. I think that's one of the best books of the 20th century in Mexico. I think it's a marvelous, just amazing book, and it has one of the best short stories I've ever read, which is La La culpa es de los Tlaxcaltecas, so the fault is of the Tlaxcaltecan or something like that, which is like a rewriting of the Malinche myth. And she's always playing with these different times and taking also into account the idea she had of time in pre-Hispanic culture and in indigenous cultures, and playing with it. It's just a beautiful, amazing book. And a writer that's younger than me, let me think for a second. I just read a wonderful book by Yolanda Segura, who I'm pretty sure is younger than me. I'm not real good with ages, but I think she is. She has a book of poems that just came out that it's called, I'm terrible with titles. I'll tell you in a second. And she has many wonderful books published in Almadía. This one is published in a new publishing press that is called Palíndroma, and it blew my mind. I think it's wonderful.
Sí, de autores, de autoras, de los que ya no somos de los anteriores, ¿no? Bueno, tengo dos nombres. Uno porque reescribe la tradición oral quechua, José María Arguedas, ¿no? Yo creo que es un clásico, El zorro de arriba, El zorro de abajo, Los ríos profundos, toda la obra de Arguedas es como... Además, tristemente, en Perú sigue ese colonialismo interno, tanto en Perú como en México, bueno, no hablar de los otros países de Latinoamérica, siempre es exclusión a no aceptar en el canon lo indígena, ¿no?
Well, with regard to past authors, one that comes to mind is José María Arguedas. From Peru, Peru is another place where colonialism still persists, as in Mexico. So that's one author.
Sí, de México hay una autora que es muy bueno que lo lean los chicos que van iniciando para que también sepan la gran tradición literaria que tenemos en México, aparte de los autores más conocidos de México. Hay una escritora muy rara, ganó el Villaurrutia en el 61, Josefina Vicen. Rarísima.
Josefina Vicen.
Josefina Vicen.
Another one is Josefina Vicen, who won the Villaurrutia Prize in Mexico in
61.
61. Yeah, and this is a very weird author.
Sí, es una autora rarísima. Hay un libro que se llama El libro vacío. Es raro, es como para dejar de escribir, ¿no? Es como para leerlo y dejar de escribir. Así te atormenta ese libro.
It's wonderful. I love it.
She has a book that's titled The Empty Book, and it's so odd that it makes you want to stop writing.
Y de los autores jóvenes, pues de mi tradición, que es un escritor que podemos hablar en zapoteco y comentarnos y hacer crítica literaria en zapoteco, es un escritor muy jovencito que tiene unos poemas así brillantísimos o muy profundos, se llama Ángel Aristarco. Me gustaría igual verlo, que publique su obra. De hecho, tiene una novela, bueno, un libro de cuentos en una editorial muy pequeñita que está en línea, que se llama Vispero. Igual lo pueden buscar en línea. Ángel Aristarco.
The second author, the young author, is Ángel Aristarco, who also shares Zapotec culture and someone that he can talk with. And he has one book out. ¿Cómo se llama el libro?
Se llama Mientras agoniza la luz y está en editorial Avispero.
And the press is Avispero, it's a new press. So yeah, he's got, the title of the book is While the Light Agonizes. So that's available if you're interested.
Y hay una gran poeta en lengua zoque que se llama Miquea Sánchez, que ella, bueno, está en editoriales, yo creo que está moviendo apenas su obra al inglés, así que apenas están preparando su edición al inglés, digamos, pero es una poeta absoluta, ¿no? Todo lo que ella escribe es como, no sé, tiene una gran fuerza, de Miquea Sánchez.
Miquea
Sánchez.
Third author is Miquea Sánchez,
Sí.
and she's a great poet.
Sí, tiene un título que no me gusta tanto, se llama Cómo ser un buen bárbaro, algo así. Cómo ser un buen bárbaro, cómo ser un buen bárbaro, algo así.
She has a book out which the title, for Quintino doesn't really like that much, but the title is How to Be a Good Barbarian.
Okay, Sarah, how are we doing with time? Sorry?
One more question.
Okay, from the audience? No one? Okay, I'll keep talking then. So one thing, that's a final question actually, because the three of us share an experience of leaving Mexico to study somewhere else, right? The one who didn't come back was me. But I'm curious about the experience for you in the United States, for you in Chile, and how did that mark your thinking and your writing?
Well, for me, it was an amazing experience in many ways. For once, I met my husband there, so my life would be very different without that. But also, I studied in New York an MFA that's called Creative Writing in Spanish. So I actually went to New York to meet with all of these people writing from Argentina, from Chile, from Spain, from Colombia. And so I think my encounter with all of these ways of speaking Spanish and all of these traditions, literary traditions, that are in a way so close to ours and so distant, because you have to know that the exchange, the literary exchange between the different countries, Spanish-speaking countries, is still really difficult because of market and because of aduanas, the customs issues and taxes issues, and so many material things that makes this exchange really difficult. What happens is that you really sometimes don't know what people are writing in Ecuador, what people are writing in Nicaragua, even though our cultures are so close and our language is the same. So for me, it was just a wonderful experience, and it opened up my eyes to so many things. And also, of course, just living in New York was a school in itself. It's a city where you can learn something every day about cultures, about art, about just precarity also in capitalism, and also just the landscapes, I think, change what I write. For me, it was so important. I've never lived close to the water, and I think that was a life-changing experience.
Sí, estar lejos es como tomar distanciamiento y eso es muy bueno para todos, ¿no? Yo creo como experiencia esencial, y ya después de eso uno no termina escribiendo de eso, pero sí permea un poco tu escritura.
So to be away, to travel, is to take distance from things, and it's an essential experience that permeates one's work.
Sí, en Chile aprendí también la vitalidad del pensamiento andino, ¿no? Como estas conexiones muy profundas que puede existir en todas las culturas mesoamericanas, en las culturas andinas. Hay como una conexión muy particular, por ejemplo, entre México y Perú, por ejemplo, ¿no? Como casi identitariamente, culturalmente somos muy similares. Que cosa en Chile está muy desplazada, pero vivir en Chile también me ayudó mucho a comprender toda esa reivindicación de los mapuches, de todas las causas que ellos encabezan, ¿no? La vitalidad de ese pensamiento mapuche.
In Chile, to learn about the vitality of Andean thought and about the similarities of Mesoamerican cultures. So the connections between Peru and Mexico, and also about Mapuche struggles in Chile.
Y curiosamente lo que más me dejó sacudido en mi español son todas las expresiones de la ruralidad del español chileno, ¿no? Wow, está permeado de una ruralidad porque yo viví muy hasta el sur, en Valdivia, entonces estaba muy lejos de Santiago, y entonces todo lo que preserva ahí el lenguaje rural de la gente, a pesar de que muchos de ellos son universitarios, pero mantienen esa fuerza en una manera muy particular de hablar su español. Eso también me sacudió bastante.
In the Chilean version that he encountered, which was in the south of Chile, in Valdivia, far from Santiago, there was this rural quality to the language that was infusing the way everyone would speak. So that was a feature that he found appealing.
Y por otra parte, pues no, uno no escribe de sus experiencias de viaje, sino que después de eso también se toma otro largo distanciamiento y después de eso ya buscar tu propio ejercicio de escritura, ¿no?
And then after travel, I saw that he immediately wrote about his travels. That requires another moment of distancing, and then to incorporate those experiences and eventually have it show in writing.
Bueno,
Okay, so I think we're ready to close the program. Thank you very much for being here, even though we're still wondering whether we should be in persons or not. But we really, this is a lively festival, and we hope to see you in the years to come. And thank you again for the organizers for the opportunity to have this wonderful conversation with two writers I really admire.